for coming in to share some new ideas with us today. Hi, have you heard about working memory? No, what is that? Working memory is the system our brain uses to temporarily store and manipulate information. It's like a mental scratch pad that helps us hold on to information while we use it. That's really interesting. How does that work? Well, there's actually 3 components to working memory: the phonological loop, the visual spatial sketchpad, and the central executive. The phonological loop is responsible for processing and storing auditory information, and the visuospatial sketchpad does the same for visual information, and the central executive controls integrates both of them. Wow, that's fascinating. How does the central executive work? The central executive is responsible for deciding what information to pay attention to, coordinating the different components of working memory, and manipulating information to perform tasks. It's like the conductor of an orchestra. Have you ever noticed that it's easier to remember something when you're really paying attention to it? Definitely. Why is that? It's because attention is a key component of working memory. And when we focus our attention on something, we're more likely to encode it into our working memory and be able to remember it later. That makes sense. So does that mean we have an unlimited working memory capacity if we pay attention to everything? Unfortunately not. Working memory has a limited capacity and we can only hold a certain amount of information at once, but paying attention can help us use our working memory more efficiently. Did you know that working memory has a limited capacity? Really? How much can we hold at once? It varies from person to person, but on average, we can hold about 4 to 7 items in our working memory at once. And this is known as our working memory capacity. That doesn't seem like a lot. Why is our capacity so limited? It's because working memory is a temporary storage system. It's designed to hold information briefly while we use it to perform a task. If we tried to hold on to it, too much information at once, it would overload our working memory and make it difficult to perform the task efficiently. So we've talked about how working memory allows us to hold on to information temporarily, but what happens when we want to remember something for a longer period of time? That's actually where long-term memory comes in. When we want to remember something beyond the moment, our brain has to transfer that information from working memory to long-term memory. Interesting. How does that process work? Well, there are a few different ways that information can move from working memory to long-term memory. One common way is through repetition. The more we repeat something, the more likely it is to stick in our long-term memory. Another way is through elaboration. So connecting new information to something we already know well can help it move along our long-term memory more easily. We've talked about working memory and what it is and how it works, but I'm curious, how does working memory develop over time? That's a great question. Working memory is actually something that develops throughout childhood and adolescence. Really? Can you tell us more about that? Sure. When we're born, our working memory is very limited. And as we grow and learn, our working memory capacity increases. By the time we're teenagers, our working memory is almost as good as an adult's. That's really interesting. Are there any factors that can influence how quickly or effectively working memory develops? Yes, there are. Genetics can play a role, as can environmental factors like nutrition and education. Studies have shown that certain activities like playing an instrument or doing puzzles can help improve working memory development in children and adolescents. So it sounds like working memory is something that can be developed and improved over time. Absolutely. Just like our muscles, our brain can be strengthened through practice and exercise. So we've talked a lot about working memory, what it is, how it works, but what about its relationship to academic performance? How does working memory affect academic success? Working memory is actually very closely linked to academic performance. And studies have shown that students with better working memory tend to do better in school, particularly in subjects like math and reading. That's really interesting. Why is that? Well, think about it. Working memory is what allows us to hold information in our mind and manipulate it. That's a crucial skill for things like doing math problems or reading comprehension. If your working memory is limited, you might have trouble keeping track of all the information that you need to solve a problem or understand a passage. So it sounds like working memory plays a big role in learning and academic success. Yes, definitely. And the good news is that working memory can be trained and improved through practice and exercises. So there's always ways to help students who might be struggling with this skill. So we've talked about working memory and its importance in holding and manipulating information, but I've also heard that working memory is closely linked to executive function. Can you tell us more about that? Yes, that's correct. Executive function is a set of mental processes that helps us plan, organize, and achieve goals. And working memory is actually a key component of executive function. It allows us to hold information in our mind while we make decisions, solve problems, and set goals. That makes sense. Can you give us an example of how working memory and executive function might work together in a real life situation? Sure. Let's say you're trying to plan a dinner party and you'll need to remember who you invited, what food you're going to serve, and what time the party starts. That all requires working memory, but you'll also need to use executive function to plan and organize everything, deciding what tasks need to be done, in what order, and by when. And as you're working through all of that, your working memory is helping you hold on to those details and information that you really need. So it sounds like working memory and executive function are closely intertwined and that they're both important for things like decision making, problem solving, and goal setting. Exactly. And because working memory is a skill that can be trained and improved, it's possible to strengthen both working memory and executive function through exercises and practice. We've talked a lot about working memory, what working memory is and how it works, but what happens to working memory as we age? Well, unfortunately, working memory is one of the cognitive skills that tends to decline as we get older. That's not good news. Can you tell us more about how aging affects working memory? Sure. As we age, the volume of our brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for working memory, tends to decrease. And that means that the capacity of our working memory can decrease as well. We might also find that we are having trouble multitasking and switching between tasks quickly, which are both things that rely on working memory. Are there ways to slow down or prevent this decline in working memory? Yes, there are. And one of the most effective things that we can do is to stay mentally and physically active. Engaging in activities that challenge our working memory, like learning a new skill or doing puzzles, can help keep our brain sharp, and getting regular exercise and staying socially engaged are also important for maintaining cognitive function as we age. So it sounds like there's things that we can do to help mitigate the effects of aging on our working memory. Yes, definitely. Just like with physical health, taking care of our brain health through lifestyle choices can make a big impact on our cognitive function as we age. We've talked about what working memory is and how it works, but I've also heard that working memory can be related to mental health conditions like ADHD and depression. Can you tell us more about that? Yes, that's correct. In ADHD, for example, individuals often struggle with working memory. They might have trouble remembering information, staying focused, or multitasking. In depression, working memory can also be affected. Individuals might have trouble concentrating or having difficulty recalling details from their memory. That's really interesting. Can you explain why working memory might be related to these conditions? Well, in the case of ADHD, researchers believe that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for working memory, might not be functioning as well as it should. And in depression, it's thought that the changes in brain chemistry might impact working memory and other cognitive functions. So it sounds like working memory is an important aspect of these conditions. Yes, definitely. And the good news is that there are interventions that can help improve working memory in individuals with these conditions. For example, in ADHD, behavioral interventions and medications can be effective for improving working memory. And in depression, cognitive behavioral therapy and other forms of psychotherapy can help improve cognitive function, including working memory. That's really helpful information. It sounds like working memory is an important factor in mental health, and there are ways to address working memory issues in these conditions. So, what are some strategies or techniques that can help improve working memory? Yes, definitely. There are several strategies that can be effective in strengthening working memory. Can you give us some examples? Sure. One of the most effective strategies is called chunking, and this involves breaking down information into smaller, more manageable chunks. For example, if you're trying to remember a long number, you might break it down into groups of 3 or 4 digits. This makes information easier to remember and reduces the load on your working memory. That's a great tip. What are some other strategies? Another effective strategy is called rehearsal, and this involves repeating information over and over in your mind. For example, if you're trying to remember a phone number, you might repeat it to yourself several times to help it stick in your memory. Those are both great strategies. Are there any others? Yes, there are several other techniques that can be effective, such as visualization, association, and using mnemonic devices. These all involve creating mental images or connections between pieces of information to help them stick in your memory. That's really helpful. It sounds like there are several strategies that can improve working memory and that they can be incorporated into our daily lives. Yes, definitely. With practice, these strategies can become second nature and help us to improve our ability to remember and process information. We've talked a lot about working memory and why it's important, but how does working memory actually play a role in our daily lives? Working memory is involved in a wide variety of tasks that we do every day. For example, when we read, we use our working memory to hold on to the information we've just read so that we can understand the rest of the sentence or the paragraph. When we listen to someone speak, we use our working memory to hold on to the beginning of their sentence while we process the end of it. That's really interesting. Can you give us some more examples of how working memory is used in daily life? Sure. When we're trying to solve a problem, we use our working memory to keep track of the different pieces of information we need to consider. And when we're driving, we use our working memory to keep track of the cars around us and anticipate what they might do next. And then when we're learning a new skill, we're also using our working memory to hold on to the steps that we need to follow. It sounds like working memory plays a role in almost everything we do. Yes, exactly. Working memory is a crucial cognitive skill that helps us make sense of the world around us and navigate our daily lives. That's really helpful information. It makes me appreciate just how important working memory is in our daily lives. We've talked about how working memory plays a role in a lot of cognitive tasks, but what about creativity? Can working memory affect our ability to be creative? Yes, definitely. Working memory can both enhance and hinder our ability to think creatively. How so? Well, on the one hand, having a strong working memory can help us hold on and manipulate different pieces of information in our minds. This can be really helpful when we're trying to come up with new and innovative ideas. On the other hand, if our working memory is overloaded or distracted, it can be harder to access the information we need to be creative. That's really interesting. Can you give us some examples on how working memory can enhance or hinder our creativity? So, for example, let's say you're trying to write a song, and having a strong working memory can help you hold on to different melodies, chord progressions, and lyrics as you're composing. However, if you're distracted or overloaded, you might have a harder time accessing these different elements and putting them together in a cohesive way. That makes sense. Are there any other ways that working memory can affect our creativity? Yes, another way that working memory can affect creativity is by influencing our ability to make connections between different pieces of information. When our working memory is strong, we're better able to make these connections and come up with new and innovative ideas. When our working memory is overloaded or distracted, it can be harder to see these connections and think creatively. That's really helpful information. It sounds like working memory is an important cognitive skill when it comes to being creative. We've learned a lot about working memory, and it's important in our daily lives. What areas of research are scientists currently exploring when it comes to working memory? There are many exciting areas of research in the field of working memory. One area is investigating how working memory is related to other cognitive abilities such as attention, perception, and decision making. That sounds interesting. Can you tell us more about that research? Sure. Scientists are trying to understand how different cognitive abilities interact with one another and how working memory can affect these interactions. For example, how does working memory affect our ability to pay attention to certain things or to make decisions quickly? That's really fascinating. What other areas of research are being explored? Another area of research is looking at the neural base of working memory. Scientists are using brain imaging techniques to better understand how working memory works in the brain and how it's affected by different factors such as aging or mental health conditions. Wow, that's cutting edge research. Are there any other areas of research you'd like to mention? Yes, one final area of research that's currently being explored is developing interventions to improve working memory. Scientists are looking for different ways to train and enhance working memory, such as through cognitive training programs or brain stimulation techniques. That's really exciting. It sounds like there's a lot of potential for new discoveries in the field of working memory. Definitely. The more we understand about working memory, the better equipped we'll be to help people overcome cognitive challenges and reach their full potential.